Okay, welcome back to this full course on Excel eSports and how to get good, I guess. We're in the fundamentals section of the playlist and we are on the data tables video. This may be the most important video in the whole of the fundamentals section, so let's get into it. So first of all, what is a data table? So let's say we have some inputs and we have a model. So in this example, I've taken a loan value, a number of months that we'll have the loan for, and an interest rate. And then I've put a model together that will tell us the month, the capital payment, the interest payment, and then the capital on the loan that's outstanding. So we'll see that drop to 0. Now these inputs are flexible, so I could say we only want the loan over 12 months, so a single year, and so on and so on. So I could change all these parameters. Now here's the magic of a data table. The total interest is just the sum of this column. And let's say we wanted to know what the interest was if we had a different interest rate. So an intuitive way might be to manually come into this box. Let's change it to 0.5%, and we see, okay, 766 interest. Change it to 1%, we can see that creep up. Change it back to 5. So we might want to cycle through all of these to find out what our answer is. Now a data table essentially does that for you. So in this video, we're going to start basic, show you how to use a data table to solve this, and then how to expand on that and kind of solve any problem that you like that has multiple inputs and multiple outputs. So to run a data table, you're going to set up what you want to change your input variables to in a column like this. You can also split it across in a row, but we'll do a column. You are going to put your answer in this box here. So let's say equals the sum of interest paid. So the question is, what is the interest paid under these interest rates? We highlight the whole table, and then we can come to what if analysis, which is in the data tab, what if analysis, and then we have data table. The shortcut for this is Alt-DT, so that's what I'll use, Alt-DT. So you just press them in sequence, you don't need to hold Alt. And you have two options here. Now in this box, we need to tell Excel where our input variable is. So earlier we were changing this cell here to get the percent, so that's where our input variable is that we want to change to these variables. So Alt-DT, and if the variables are spilled down in a column like this, we use the column input cell box here, and if it's spilled across in a row, we use the row input cell. I always set it up like this, so I just default to this column input cell here, so I don't need to remember anything. It's just I always spill it down here, and then it's my column input cell. So if I now click this here as my input cell and press OK, we are going to spill all of the interest payments under those rates. So what this allows us to do in the context of Excel eSports is build a complicated model that solves a question for a number of inputs, and then we can change the question number to give us what the answer would be when we change the input variables. Now I'll come to that later, so you'll see it in practice. But for now, let's just keep with the simple examples. Now let's ask the question, what would the interest rate be if we changed the term lengths? So it's exactly the same thing again. We need to put our answer above here, so equals this. And by the way, this cell is just the sum of those. I think I showed that earlier. So we highlight the whole table, Alt-DT, and our column input cell this time is the months. So now we have a different interest rate for the months. So I probably should have formatted these cells a bit better earlier. Now, what about a slightly more complicated question? What about flexing the interest rate to all of these and the months, the term of the loan, to all of these? So how would we flex both and see what the interest would be for every combination here? Now there are two ways to do this. The first is a 2D data table. So let's copy all of our interest rates down here. Then let's put our term lengths across here. So let's say equals 2 row, and there are many ways to do this, 2 row of this. So now we have a grid where if we can spill in here the results for flexing these, we'll have every combination, because we'll have 6 months with all these interest rates, 12 months with all these interest rates, and so on. So in this example, you actually need the answer to be here rather than above here, because obviously these cells are taken now. So let's say equals our interest, and now this time we can highlight the whole lot, press Alt-DT, and again our column input cell, which is the column down here, is the interest rate, so that's there. And the row input cell, our row input cell here, is the number of years. So let's say number of months, sorry. So now I have two inputs. If I press OK, we're actually going to get the interest rates for all of those. And let's just conditionally format that as well. So you can see the most expensive obviously will be the longer term and a higher interest rate. Okay, so I've shown you two input variables. Now in Excel eSports cases, you might have a question that has 2, 3, 4, maybe 100 variables. So you might have 100 arrows moving around a map, and you need to change those input variables to get an answer for 20 different question numbers. So now let's come into where we want both multiple input variables like this and multiple results. We'll start with multiple results because that's the easier way to do it. So let's say we wanted the total interest paid within year 1 and the outstanding capital in year 1. So our total interest in year 1 is this, the first 12 months of interest payments, and the total capital outstanding is this outstanding balance after 12 months. So we can actually put our answers in like this: total interest year 1, total capital outstanding year 1, and we can do the first version of the data table here. Our column input cell is just going to be the interest rate here. That's what the input we're flexing. And again, we get both of those things out. So it's exactly like the first data table I showed you. So the thing to remember about this method is that you can spill as many outputs of your model, selected outputs, as you like across here. But now we have the problem that if we want to flex 2 variables, we can't do it because we're spilling 2 results here. So how do we put the variables in? And this is kind of the ultimate form of data table, if you like. You can spill as many output results as you want from your model and as many input results. And the trick is to make your input results rely on the one values cell. So because we're flexing the term length and interest rate, let's make those rely on only one cell in our model. So term length 60, let's do dash 5%. So what we can do is we can say equals text split this on that dash. Let's actually spill it downwards. And now we have our 2 input cells are relying on one input cell. So we can then make that our only input and flex this value. Now, one instructive point is that my old data table has errored out. And that is because when I linked it like this, I was linking to a static value, which is an input to our model. Now that this value is not static, it relies on a formula, that doesn't work. I need to point it to a static value. So if I delete the data table out, I'll just show you how I would fix that. So I would say equals 60 dash and all of these. So these would now be my inputs. I know the formatting doesn't look very nice, but don't worry about that. And now I can actually link to a static value here, and we would get all of the answers that we had before, because this is linked to a static value. I'm saying the input is this, and then these parts of the model drive off of this. So now let's do 2 variables with 2 outputs where I was. So I want to basically link this to all of my interest rate calculations. So let's just get back to where we were. So what I want to do is I want to say equals the term and a dash and 2 row of the interest rates. What that's going to do is it's going to give me a spilled array of every combination of term and interest rates, just like before. We can then put that whole thing down into a 2-col. And then now we have all our combinations, but in one cell, and we can link those to be this input variable. So let's put our answers here again. Equals this, equals this. And then we can do our whole data table. So we just have one input variable, which is the column input cell from this static input. And as you will see, I'm just going to color those green to show that those are the answers we're looking for. Neaten the formatting up a bit. So this is the interest rates we would pay in the first year for 24 months at 0.5%, 24 months at 1%, and so on and so on. So we have every combination showing us the interest paid in the first year and outstanding capital in the first year. So this is the most complex example, so if you didn't quite understand that, don't worry. Essentially, we are spilling out as many model output cells that we want the answer to across here, and then as many inputs as we want across here by combining them into one variable. So now let's jump into a proper example of this solving an Excel eSports competition case. So we have a list of scarves here, 5 scarves, and the colors that are contained in those scarves. We need to count how many of the given color are in all 5. So in this case, we need to count how many yellows are in this. So let's just build a model for one question and then use a data table to adapt it to say, what if the input question changed to all of these, then what would the answer be? So we have a list of letters and colors here. So let's pull that out. And let's just start to build a model for one of these. So let's do the example here. So first of all, we want to count how many blues, which is the letter B, are in these strings. So we'll come to the tricks of how to do this kind of question later, but for now I'm going to do it quite quickly. I'm going to add all the letters together, and I'm going to say the length of this minus the length of, substitute this, where the letter is that, and we want to substitute it for nothing, which needs to lock a couple of things here, and that is going to actually count the colours that appear, and then we're looking for a blue. So let's put our inputs up here for now. We have an input as blue, so we are going to say xlookup this in here and give me what number appears. So 16. So we have made a model that solves this question for one set of inputs, those inputs being blue and the 5 scarves. So we do not want to have to redo this 20 times for all of these questions. So what we want to do is have one input that spills all of these input variables, and that is exactly what we're going to do now. So the way that we normally do this in Excel eSports is we'll say example 4, and then we will, to get all of our inputs as one variable, we'll say xlookup example 4 and take advantage of the fact that xlookup will spill arrays. Watch the lookup video if you don't know that trick yet. But we have one static value, which is an input variable, which now spills all of the things that drive our model. So if we change this to 61, question 61 for example, we get a different set of inputs. So let's make this rely on those inputs. So we're going to say equals this, and this is the concatenation of all of this. Okay, so if I now go back to example 4, we're going to look for example 4 here, spill all of our input variables, and then our model is driven off of only one single thing, despite the fact that there are six variables here. And our answers here, so let's just put that in bold. So I want to set a data table up for all these question numbers, and I want to say what happens to the answer here if I change this input cell to all of these numbers. So just like I showed you before, we're going to say Alt DT. We're going to have a column input cell because our input's varying here in this column, and this is our input that drives the rest of the model. And it's going to tell me all of the answers here. So now I can just copy those answers into here, and it will solve all of the questions. And that's why this is such a fundamental tool that you need on your tool belt for Excel eSports. Whenever a question gets complicated and requires a long spilled out model, as long as you can solve it for one question, you can solve it for any other question with this technique. Now, if you're really good at Excel with dynamic arrays, you can obviously just solve all this in a single cell and spill it down. Even for me, as a reasonably now advanced competitor, I often default to this model making method and then a data table to spill all the answers. So that is it. Quite a technical video if you've never seen this before, so don't worry too much. But use the sheet in the link and try to follow along, and that will help you a lot. This is a super important technique to know. So next time we're going to do a video on error checking and debugging. That will be quite a short one, and then we're going to get into kind of the meat and potatoes of Excel eSports cases, of the questions you might see and how to solve them with lots of little tips and tricks. So subscribe for more, and I will see you next time.